Welcome to Well Played Podcast, a podcast on all things playful and joyous. This is a podcast committed to bringing you all there is to know about playful learning and teaching. Today I am with Stefanie Crawford, and we are going to be talking about risk. But before we get to talking about risk in our classroom, love for Stefanie to introduce herself.
Well, hello everyone.
Hello.
From Central Illinois. I teach 8th grade literature, and I've been doing this for 12 years, and I just started recently in the last couple of years gamifying and using those game-based elements, and this year went full gamification.
Full on gamification. I love it.
Full on gamification.
That's awesome. And Stefanie also this year started doing vlogging.
Oh, yes.
Right? Like, I think that in and of itself is a bit of a risk take, right?
It is. And thank you for the encouragement, by the way. That you were helpful in that, implemental in that. But
we got to give some context. We met at an ed camp, Illinois, right?
Okay, so really our whole friendship is based on risk taking, quite honestly.
This is perfect for this episode.
It is. So you came down to an ed camp in Chicago. Carrie Baucom came to that same ed camp. And I drove up the 3 hours to get to that ed camp to meet random people from Twitter.
I drove down 2 hours.
But I think that, like, in itself, the idea that you're going to an area you're not familiar with, I was new really to traveling to ed camps at the time, was really just getting into building those relationships more and all of that. So taking that risk and driving the 3 hours and getting there, I could have easily said, no, it's not worth it. I am too scared to do this. I know no one. But it turned out to be like the best thing ever.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Like, sometimes that little bit of risk can change everything.
Yeah.
So the context here is we met at this ed camp, and we attended a couple sessions together, one of which that was the first session I've ever done on my vlog. Very first one that I did.
I was there for the ground floor.
on YouTube, and kind of using it as a reflective tool. And I think out of that session, Stefanie is the only one that actually went on and did YouTube. Not calling any of you out if you're listening to this, but Stefanie is clearly the best student. So
yes.
But in all seriousness, that's really cool that you have started a vlog and took that risk and share things out. It's an excellent vlog. We'll put that in the show notes to links to your vlog.
Thanks. Yeah, vlogging, and I would encourage everyone to take that risk, even if it's just to keep for themselves as a reflective piece for how they feel like they're doing throughout the year. I think we've talked about that before too, but it's just, blogs are great, but you are more honest. I think because you're recording and you're giving those instant reactions to things, you just get a more honest, right there in the moment representation of how things are going, I feel like, a lot of times.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love vlogging. That was probably my favorite sort of quote unquote risk that I took last year. But if we're going to widen this conversation a little bit out about risk and taking risk, I recently finished a book by Mel Robbins on how our mind is like trained to like keep us safe. So we are horribly risk averse to the tune of even simple things like raising our hands, like any kind of sticking our neck out. Our mind kind of wants to say there's a chance that something bad's going to happen. And what happens is the moment you have that hesitation, your mind goes into this spotlight effect, and it amplifies the potential problem so large in your mind that you end up not acting on it. And what I've learned, both from the book and just life in general over the last couple of years, most often it's like worth taking the risk. It's worth going to the ed camp. It's worth putting out the vlog. It's worth trying that new lesson plan.
Right.
And I think we have like this habit of like kind of saying no and staying well within like what we're comfortable doing. Uh,
Yet we want our students to do the opposite of what we do. We want them to take those risks, even when we might be too comfortable to do that. We might be too scared to do that.
and
But
isn't
yet
that
we're like, oh, raise your hand. It's safe to raise your hand. There's, you need to contribute. You have to be wrong in order to be right.
yeah? No, I mean,
And we
isn't it
don't show them that.
isn't that crazy that like
Absolutely.
that we're like we're like a foot away from a body of people that is constantly taking risks. Like as kids, like
Right.
they're constantly put in different projects, different assignments. They're trying out for the play, right? Like these people are constantly in a mode of changing, growth, taking risks, and we're like right there. We're like on the front lines of change, and we're like, but I'm just going to stand here and do the same thing.
Right.
It's so crazy that it's so close, but yet so far away. I just came back from a presentation I gave, and there's a spot in the presentation where I asked for some audience participation, and you can guess how well that goes over in a room full of teachers. Like, it is amazing, guys. Like, nothing's going to hurt. Like, raise your hand, do it, take that chance. It it's not
I
it's not that bad.
I had a situation kind of like that at ICE this year, and I was doing some game-based elements and bringing them in, and there's a couple things I wanted people to try hands-on just to see that, like, using dice is not that scary, to introduce a game. And I asked for the participation too, and
Ooh.
I had to like shame people into it, and I did.
Oh, I
I
totally.
said, come on, we can all do this. We have 2 minutes right now. Get on your phones, get your answer, tweet that out. You really had to, I mean, it was like a classroom again. You had to get them to come out of those
I totally
comfort
shamed
zones.
shamed my conference attendees. I was like, look, I'm asking for some audience participation. I put in like 100 hours on this presentation. The least you guys can do is raise your hands and get up here. And like, I just want you to know, there was a room full of like 500 people, and I got just enough people to play the game. Like I needed 10 people out of 500, and I got
Okay,
it.
so wait, let me tie in this. Okay, great, really, I guess, idea about taking risks to that. So one of those people that came to that session, who I had to kind of shame into participating, she ended up contacting me because she's a coach. She took back and presented about using game-based elements in the classroom
Nice.
to all of her teachers. She contacted me about ways like maybe to adapt them for lower levels, and then told me that a reading teacher was going to start doing leaderboards and everything. So she was shamed into it a little bit at first, but she did it. She took that risk, and it's paid off in a huge way because her teachers have totally benefited from it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're trying something new now.
I think too, once you take a few risks, and man, you might be the perfect person to ask here, coming from that ed camp story where you said you were like starting to do these things, right? You started
Right.
to go to the ed camp. I think there's like a level in us that once you start to become that explorer, that sort of seeks things out and takes risks, it's I don't want to say addictive, but it's you kind of want to continue it. You're kind of like, and it sounds like this is what this lady did, right?
Yeah.
You shamed
Yeah.
her into that first bit of the risk, but then once she got into it, her mind started to say, well, what other ways can I use this? And then she took risks by going off script. You
Yeah.
probably taught her a way to use this dice, a singular way. And I always say this in my presentation, that this is just an example.
Yeah.
But like teachers are just so good at like, well, the rubric says, the rules say, this is
Right.
this is what the lesson plan says, so do exactly what the lesson, like, oh man, like modify this. And it's so awesome that she took, an additional risk and changed it up.
Right. And I do think that for me, even before ed camps, I was probably more willing to take risks at times in my own classrooms. And I know that not everyone's at that same comfort level, but I think the lesson's always the same. There's always just one little step you can do that's like that next thing that seems risky to you that if you just try it just that one time, it doesn't have to be traveling 3 hours to an ed camp. It can be something small. And even if you feel like you're less likely to move out of your comfort zone, just those little baby steps will still get you there. It
Yeah.
might take a little longer, but you'll still move.
Yeah, there's I'm gonna paraphrase here, but like there's a
I
there
know I'm long-winded, all right? I'm sorry.
no, I mean there's this quote that really goes with what you're saying, that
Okay.
it's about these little changes, and the quote goes something like that we overestimate what we can do in a day, and we horribly underestimate what we can do in several days.
Yeah.
Because it's really like about just those tiny little, if you work out just 20 minutes a day, you know, 3 times a week, like that actually will produce probably greater change than saying like I'm gonna totally like crush it and work out for like an hour and a half and just destroy myself this Friday. But then if I don't do it again, look,
So I feel like I can kind of go along with that too, because I did my running streak where I wanted to just commit to a small change. So I just wanted to do at least 1 mile a day. I didn't have a time frame set for how long I wanted to do it. I just knew that I needed to do something little to make a big change. And I didn't want it to be like, okay, I'm going to get out there and run for an hour. It needed to be something that seemed attainable, that I couldn't make an excuse to get out of. And that first day turned into over a year, just going out and committing to essentially 10 minutes in one day.
I love
So I
that.
think, in the classroom, it's the same thing. You don't have to, just like you said, it doesn't need to be this major change. It just needs to be the fact that you find something, even something little, and follow through with it. Just make sure you commit to using it that day, maybe using it for a week, seeing what happens.
Yeah, there's a Japanese philosophy called the Keynesian principle, and it's this. It's like it's micro, tiny, like whatever's smaller than micro goal setting, And the idea is when you set a goal that small, that simple, you build habits because you won't miss it. So
Yeah.
literally, like the Keynesian principle is going to say, like commit to saying I'm going to do one push-up a day because you will the point is you will be successful at it. Like even if you
Right.
forget to do it and you're crawling in bed and you're like, oh crap, I didn't do my
I can
push-up.
do one
I
push
can
up.
I can get up and do my one push-up. But the reality is most days when you don't forget about it, like you're down there, you're doing a push-up. What are you going to do? You're actually going to just do one. Like you're probably going to still do like 5, 10. Someday you're going to
Right.
be like, how many can I do? Right.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, 30 days later, 40 days later, like you have a habit of like kind of exercising every day.
Yeah.
And if then you just add a different like tiny micro goal set, but like
And especially when we talk about how busy our lives are, something like that, again, it really takes away all the excuses.
it does. Like when you're like I committed to doing one push-up, like
Yeah.
I, I'm going to do it. I mean, seriously, like if you read it, there's a book, The Keynesian Way, that I read. It gives a ton of these examples, like going on the treadmill for a minute. So even your mile is actually a big goal as far as the Keynesian Way
Right.
goes, but it's the same principle, right? Like you chose this thing that you knew you could be. So you didn't say I want to try to run a
Right.
marathon. You just said like
Right.
we're going to commit to this, and you did it. You took that risk. You did it. I love it. So there's another like thing I would love if people are still listening to us 13 minutes in, but assuming we still have you out there, something that I really want to sort of invite you guys to do is I did a 5 for 5 challenge.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, probably a couple months ago. I'm actually doing one this week, so by the time you hear this, I'll be 2 days in to my second 5 for 5 challenge. The principle is really simple: 5 straight days of, committing to doing something each of those days. And it can be anything. The first time I did it, I wanted to try to do 5 vlogs in a week. That was a challenge for me, but I did it, and it felt really good. This week, ooh, do I tell? Well, by this
Yeah.
point, they'll know, I suppose. All right, so I won't cheat. I won't like pretend like I already know what I've done for 2 days. I could do that in the podcast, but I could be like, well, Mondays was really good. I was really successful.
I could go along with that. Yes, it was amazing.
Yes. All right. So my 5 for 5 challenge. Last time I did something that was kind of professional, and I really wanted to make sure on the second one that I show you that it doesn't have to be professional, right? So it just has to be a goal. So my goal this week, I'm a little nervous, in a work week, so Monday through Friday, I'm going to commit to trying to make 5 new recipes that I've never made. I love
Ah,
I love to cook, but like I don't usually do 5 new recipes in a week.
I
Uh,
love it.
so and then I'm gonna kind of vlog throughout. I won't do 5 vlogs because that would be crazy to do that on top of my other challenge. Uh, but I will vlog it. I will at very least have 1 or 2 that kind of give you some updates. But this is an invitation for you out there. Uh, this is another format that you could use to sort of challenge yourself. And it being a show about gamification and playful learning and education, I think sometimes just we need that challenge aspect. Like you had the running streak. Here's a
Mhm.
5 for 5. I think
Well,
sometimes
it's
that
all the
helps.
same idea. 5 for 5 is essentially a 5-day streak.
Hmm.
You're setting the goal to do it for that amount of time. That's fantastic. I love it. That
So
means I have to think of a 5 for 5, darn you.
yeah, woo. So
A good thing for some people who are interested in games but maybe scared because they don't see themselves as gamers might be to play 5 different games.
look at Stephanie just served you up.
And they don't have to take a lot of time. There are several games that take, under 20 minutes to play, like Sushi Go or Jungle Speed or Bang or see, I'm naming all these so that there are no excuses.
She is.
Rhino
She
Hero.
is. I mean, for whoever is listening still, you are now experiencing Stephanie Crawford's shaming you in, and I love it. And so now there's no excuse. There are plenty of good websites for recipes. If any of you want to join me on the
There you
cooking
go.
one, I love cooking, love games. So maybe my next 5 for 5 will be a 5 streak of board games or card games. Because even though I love them, I can't say that I've ever done 5 days in a row.
I know.
That'd be
No.
huge. So, nonetheless, I mean, as you see, like this is look at the joy on both of our faces about like our run streak, our 5 for 5 challenge, Casey and Way. Like, there's just all these things that come out of taking risks, right?
And I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that it does not always work the way that we want it to.
Well, I'm
I mean,
sure there's going to be some recipes that do not work.
I think sometimes when people see, like kind of, I feel like we are trying to motivate people to do something outside of their comfort zone at times or to take that next step. And sometimes it's easy to say, well, why do they always make it seem like it's easy to do? Well, the thing is that once you take that first step, it is easy, but that doesn't mean it always works the way you want it to. But it's still you still find it easier to take that risk and to understand that, okay, if it fails, it fails. Because ultimately that failure is just you revising it and trying something different the next time. Being
Yeah.
able to laugh at yourself, being able to laugh because I'm sure if you fail at a recipe, you are going to be laughing at yourself and you're going to be laughing with us too. I mean,
That's
we're
right.
going to be sharing in that.
I will definitely vlog the failed. You'll just see me
We
like,
should be like nailed it, like a
yeah.
nailed it format.
I should you'll just see me eating like burnt crisp vegetables or something. Be like, this is
Can't wait.
delicious. This is the best charbroiled vegetable I've ever had.
That sounds so good.
I don't even know my recipes yet. It's Sunday. I need to figure this stuff out. Oh god.
That's you taking risk.
No, so like I liked what you were saying there, and what I think is sort of key and huge here is again going with why many of us stay in the comfort zone is because I think we let that those excuses kind of jump to our head, and then that's what takes over. And then you're giving yourself an excuse not to do it, right? When you're kind of like, busy, or this week we got soccer practice, like, right? So boom, now you've like given yourself an out to not play 5 board games, to not,
Yep.
vlog or blog, to not join a Twitter chat every night or something, right? There's another idea.
I like it.
Uh, but what we need to do is, what I loved what you were saying is that it's not that it's easy, but we make it look easy because I don't know, it kind of is. Like, we are intelligent human beings. Like right now, I'll admit I'm a little nervous about the challenge, like 5 days, like 5 recipes, right? But when I tell myself like no excuses, I am an educated man. Like, I can go look up some recipes. I can start to plan out my week a little bit. Like, okay, I better go to the grocery store this day, right? All right. So the difference between sort of being successful on one of these challenges and not being successful comes down, in my word, to like one single idea, and that is just you have become way more intentional.
Mm-hmm.
You're not letting life just happen to you. You are actively engaging in it. So your run streak, I am sure there were days where you're like, oh, but I got to drop my kid off here, and I got to do this, and I still got to make dinner, and oh my gosh, grades are due. Like, you could have let any one of those 3 things be the reason you didn't do your run. But the moment you decided like that this was going to be a streak, this was going to be a thing, you became intentional. You were like, well, I better wake up early and run in the morning, or I better right after school. Like, I can't wait.
I was gonna say, I am not a morning person. So rarely was there a day when I said I am going to wake up early and run. But
I wasn't going to sell you out on well played.
I'm totally fine admitting that, not a morning person, but I did every time we went on a vacation. I mean, I chaperoned the 8th grade DC trip. There were plenty of times when I thought I'm just tired and I don't want to do it, but I did it because I knew I could do 1 mile and it would be fine. And I've done this, and you're right, it's intentional. I want to do this. I want to keep going. So there were days when I was not feeling well,
like walking pneumonia, for example. Just pulling one example out. She did her run streak through walking pneumonia.
No. That was not, no. I had walking pneumonia the year before, and I just kept teaching because I just thought I was tired. It's totally fine.
Totally fine. Just fine.
You don't know that you have to stop until someone tells you have walking pneumonia.
Stop.
See? Power through it.
That's awesome.
So I would say, too, that a benefit of taking the risk, well, first of all, do the 5 for 5, and then tell your students you're doing it. I think you should tell your students you're doing the 5 for 5. I shared with my students that I was doing my run streak. I've shared with them when I started my vlog. I've shared with them when I'm bringing a completely new game idea into the classroom. The reason I always share that with them is because they see then on a consistent basis that even though I am making them come out of their comfort zone, I'm also going out of my comfort zone. I'm also being intentional about finding time to do these things. I am taking risks, and that I'm willing to, because I've admitted to them, like, when an idea has gone wrong, I'm like, okay, we need to revise that. What are some ideas for doing this better? I just think if you are honest with your students and you include them in that, then you create a whole class of students who is going to be more willing to take risks as adults also, who won't be so averse to stepping out and taking that next chance.
And I think in your classroom, right? Like,
right.
Talk
Absolutely.
about empathy. I mean, you're really like putting yourself in their shoes, right? Like, students tell me all the time, like, man, do teachers get it? We have this homework, that homework, all the projects seem to be due on the same day, right? And then when we think of the typical teacher schedule, while teaching is insanely difficult, I'm not going to make light of that, but it is typically very regimented. Like, you kind of know that, like, what you have to do, right? So there's this comfort zone, there's this like pattern, and we rarely, if we want to, have to break out of that pattern. So to show your students that, like, I'm shaking it up, I'm giving myself a homework assignment. Like, my week now, I got all my normal stuff, and now I got to learn a recipe, I got to go to the store, I got to like cook that. I have to eat it.
Oh,
Oh, so
no.
hard. Uh,
Michael is a very good cook, by the way, so I think that this will be a success for him.
I don't know. 5 days. I'm just more concerned about the 5 days, not the actual cooking. Just the five
So
days.
I think so. I'm going to share a story that I also think encourages you to take risks in the classroom to share with your students that you're taking risks, because I use sketch notes frequently as a form of note taking, just so that as my students move on to high school and whatever they do after, they have this valid form of note taking that is going to synthesize the information from both sides of the brain. And it's new to them, and they don't always appreciate that I'm requiring this, because it's so much easier just to have notes on the board that they copy down and don't have to think about it. But I'm honest with them from the beginning that I think it's valid, that we'll go through, the process. There's no one way to do it, all of this. And I'm honest about how I used to do notes just on the whiteboard, and you write them down word for word, and that's your notes. So they see that I've changed my way of thinking also. But then I have a student the other day that I was so excited about, because we're doing a sketch note to trace the plot of a story, and I teach 5 sections, and she's in my second class, and I was going through and doing my little mini sketch notes in dry erase marker, because I had some technology that wasn't working. And she was like, you should use sticky notes, Mrs. Crawford, and put them up. And then you'd only have to draw them once, and you could put them up for every class. And then when we don't finish the story and you want to put it up the next day, you don't have to redraw it all. It just goes up. I mean, she was thinking how to make my life easier. And she was willing to tell me that, because she knows that, like, I share with them when things go wrong or when they go well, and that I'm taking chances. She was willing to take a risk to give me this idea that I could have said, that's awful. I won't ever use that. But she was willing just to say, oh, Mrs. Crawford, have you ever thought about doing this? So it does encourage them to take risks with you.
Yeah, and what I like about that is it there's so many ways, so many points that we do have to be the leader or the adult or the teacher, right? But this is awesome because it gave a moment where you guys were both in the trench at the same time. Like
Right.
she was helping out you on your goal, you know, which is kind of cool. So, well, I can't believe it, but our time is up, and our 2 remaining listeners need to hear hear what this reflection time is. In all seriousness, I really appreciate uh, having your take on this. It was a great episode. So I'm excited here to see what you think of our quote here. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
You surprise me. I don't care.
All right. Who now I have to decide. I'm like doing a coin toss in my head, people, right now, trying to decide. All right, here's the quote for reflection time. Great things never come from comfort zones. This is attributed to the internet. I did try to figure out who said it, and all I got was anonymous. So the internet owns this. So, all right, I'm flipping the coin. You go first.
I go first?
Yeah.
Okay. That was an interesting coin flip, by the way.
It's in my head.
Um, I think sometimes so my takeaway, we think that we're doing great things sometimes, that we're doing awesome things without leaving our comfort zones, because we've never left them to see what's possible when we do step outside of it. So even if you think, yeah, I don't really take a lot of risks, but things are going great, you don't know that because you haven't actually seen the other side. You haven't actually taken that step and walked beyond. And as someone who has not always, traveled the 3 miles to the 3 hours to ed camp, and that, who has thought things were going well, I think I'm being innovative, but maybe I haven't taken that leap outside of my comfort zone. I can say once you do it, you'll never look back. It's a whole different world. once you do that, the things that you really achieve truly are, even in your failures, great.
I love it. For me, I mean, pretty similar. Like, it strikes me that what I want to center on is the start of it. Great things, and I guess we have to ask ourselves, what are we trying to do here? Like, do you want to do great things? And that means in your life, that means in your free time, that means in your classroom. What do you want your kids to do, your students to do? Um, and I think so many of us are capable of so much more if we just would tell ourselves that I'm in it to do some great things, some great work. And great work comes from great effort, great intentionality, right? It is gonna be hard, but just because it's hard doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, right?
Right.
Like college was not easy, like right, but I went through it so that I could have my job, like. But that doesn't mean that the growth stops, right? Like, so difficulty doesn't equal that we shouldn't do it, right? Like
Right.
we got to step it up.
Right.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining us today. Love having you back on the show in
Thanks for having me.
a much more rapid succession than it took us forever to get you on the show. She's super booked.
That is so what it is. I'm just going to leave it at that and take a drink of my water.
Love it. Everybody else, thank you so much for listening. I truly, I know I am self-deprecating throughout that we have very few listeners, but to be honest, the Well Played community, the XP Lab community grows every week, and it's just an honor to have you guys part of the show. Stephanie, honor having you on the show.
Thanks, Michael. Honored to be here.
Everybody, please check out explorelikeapirate.com for all sorts of other ideas, vlogs, blogs, podcasts. Follow or subscribe, I should say, Stefanie Crawford or myself on our YouTube channels. All of that will be in the show notes below.
How about how about not me or you? How about both?
So she's an English teacher. You all know that that's what I meant. It wasn't do a coin flip in your head. Subscribe to both. Take some risks. Join us. If you happen to do the 5 for 5 challenge, the hashtag I use is hashtag 5 spelled out, the number 4, and then 5 spelled out again. 5 for 5. I'd love to see you guys tweet that out and see if you're joining us. You're 5 for 5. And everybody, have a wonderful, wonderful week.